The crowd inside the 2024 International Science Fair buzzed with electricity. Over 2,000 students, educators, scientists, and journalists filled the massive convention hall in Austin, Texas. On stage, a large banner read 2024 Global Youth Innovation Forum, sponsored by the Gates Foundation. At the back of the room, 11-year-old Prica Sharma sat quietly, her small fingers trembling as they clutched a worn-out blue notebook. Her glasses slid slightly down her nose, but she didn't bother to fix them. Her eyes were fixed on the stage. Next to her, her science teacher, Ms. Gonzalez, leaned down and whispered, "Are you okay? You look nervous." Prica gave a faint nod. "I'm fine," she said softly, though her heart was pounding. Just 1 month ago, she had been a regular 5th grader at Lincoln Elementary in San Jose. Now, she was sitting among university students and tech professionals, having been labeled by the media as the smartest girl in America. The reason? A surprise IQ test given at her school by a university-led research program had revealed her score was 95, higher than Einstein's estimated 160. Since then, her quiet life had turned upside down. News vans camped outside her family's apartment. Her parents were overwhelmed, and Prica, she was just confused. She didn't feel like a genius. She still loved reading fantasy books, collecting rock samples, and doodling molecules in her notebooks. But now everyone expected something extraordinary from her. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome philanthropist and technologist, co-chair of the Gates Foundation, Mr. Bill Gates." The crowd erupted into applause. Prica sat straighter in her chair. There he was, walking calmly onto the stage in his usual navy blue suit and light blue shirt. He didn't look like the tech titan from the documentaries she had watched. He looked normal, but when he smiled, there was a kindness in his eyes that made him seem familiar, like a favorite uncle. "Thank you," Gates began, adjusting his glasses. "It's an honor to be here with so many bright young minds. The future belongs to you, and I couldn't be more excited to hear your ideas." He began speaking about the Gates Foundation's recent efforts, clean water projects, AI in healthcare, and a revolutionary neurotechnology initiative. They were developing something called Cognivault, a brain-computer interface designed to help people with neurological injuries regain communication and motor control. As he spoke, a massive screen behind him displayed sleek diagrams of the Cognivault chip, its electrodes, the biopolymer layers, the insertion threads thinner than a human hair. Prica leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. She had read everything she could about Cognivault in the Foundation's online technical white papers. One detail about the biopolymer casing had stood out to her. At the time, she didn't want to believe it. She assumed it was a typo. But now Gates was proudly saying the same thing on stage. No one else had noticed. But she had. Her palms grew sweaty. Then Bill Gates finished his presentation and asked, "We have time for a few questions. Anyone?" Hands shot up across the auditorium. Prica hesitated. Next to her, Ms. Gonzalez gave a gentle nudge. "You've got this, ask." Before she could change her mind, a staff member handed her the microphone. She stood up on shaky legs. Gates spotted her. "Let's hear from the young lady in the back with the blue notebook." The room quieted. All eyes turned to her. "My name is Prica Sharma," she said, her voice quivering. Bill smiled. "Nice to meet you, Prica. What's your question?" Prica swallowed hard. Then she said the sentence that would change her life. "I think there might be a problem with the polymer coating on your Cognivault chip." The room froze. Bill Gates's expression didn't change immediately, but his eyes sharpened. "A problem?" he asked calmly. "What kind of problem?" Prica clutched her notebook tighter. "I read the technical paper you published in January," she said. "You mentioned using a polyether-based compound for the biocompatible layer. But that specific compound, if it's the one I think, is known to degrade in wet environments over time. It releases microparticles that can cause inflammation in neural tissue." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I think," she continued, "after about 3 years, the coating might begin to break down inside the brain. If that happens, it could damage neurons, especially in high-activity regions like the motor cortex." There was a long pause. Gates didn't respond. Instead, He handed his microphone to an assistant and stepped off the stage. Gasps echoed across the hall as he walked directly toward her. People fumbled for their phones. The cameras zoomed in. Prica Sharma. When Gates reached her row, he crouched slightly and looked at her notebook. "Do you have your notes with you?" he asked gently. She nodded and handed it to him. Inside were diagrams, references, and calculations scribbled in neat handwriting. She had even drawn comparisons between various coating materials used in biomedical devices and included a few alternatives. She had researched on her own. Gates flipped through the pages silently. After a moment, he looked up. "This is impressive," he said. He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, this 11-year-old may have just spotted a flaw in our neural interface design that none of our adult scientists saw." The room erupted into applause. Prica's face flushed red. "Would you be willing," Gates asked, "to meet my team and walk them through this?" She nodded slowly, and just like that, the course of her life shifted. What had started as a quiet observation in a fifth grader's bedroom had now become the focus of one of the world's most ambitious neurotechnology projects. And nobody, not even Bill Gates, could have predicted what would happen next. 2 days after the science fair, Prica Sharma stood in the sleek lobby of the Gates Neurotech Center in Palo Alto. It didn't feel real. She was just a fifth grader, and yet here she was, holding her blue notebook like a passport to another universe, being greeted by a woman in a lab coat who looked like she belonged in a science documentary. "Ms. Sharma?" the woman asked with a warm smile. "I'm Dr. Lena Torres. We spoke over Zoom yesterday. Welcome." Prica gave a shy nod. Her parents, standing protectively on either side, shook hands with Dr. Torres. "She's still very young," her mother said cautiously. "This isn't a job offer, right?" "Of course not," Dr. Torres replied. "This is just a research visit. A chance for Prica to share her ideas with the team, and for us to understand how she saw something we didn't." Bill Gates wasn't there yet. He was in Washington for a meeting with health officials, but he had personally scheduled the visit and insisted that everything be low pressure. Still, nothing about this felt low pressure to Prica. The building was filled with soft white lights and smooth walls lined with digital panels. She passed scientists in white coats, engineers reviewing data, and quiet rooms full of machines that looked like they belonged on a space station. In one room, she saw a clear enclosure with a robotic arm placing delicate threads, each finer than a hair, into a synthetic brain model. The sign read, "Cognivalt V3 Implantation Simulation." Dr. Torres led them to a glass-walled conference room, where 4 other researchers were waiting. "Prica," Dr. Torres said gently, "would you mind sharing your notebook with the group? You don't have to present anything formally. Just walk us through your thinking." Prica sat down, her parents just outside the glass wall, watching with cautious pride. She opened the notebook. Page by page, she explained her concern. She pointed to a diagram of the brain and the chip. She explained the potential breakdown of the polyether coating. She referenced a 2016 paper from a German university that had studied long-term degradation in similar materials. The scientists leaned forward. They didn't interrupt. They listened. After about 15 minutes, one of them, a man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, said, "Where did you learn to cross-reference biomedical coatings?" Prica shrugged. "I looked it up online." "You're 11?" another asked. Prica nodded. "I like reading about materials science, and I read all the Cognivalt white papers." The team exchanged glances. "We've been seeing some unexpected inflammation markers in our long-term pig trials," said Dr. Torres slowly. "Nothing major yet, but consistent. We hadn't connected it to the coating." "It made sense," Prica said, her voice gaining confidence. "The polymer's bond starts to shift under certain heat and moisture conditions. That can release tiny particles, which the brain interprets as invaders," one scientist muttered, already scribbling notes. Dr. Torres leaned in. "Would you be willing to stay for a while and go over some of our data with us?" Prica looked at her parents through the glass. They nodded. Her mother gave her a thumbs up. "Yes," Prica said. "I'd like that." Essays. 3 hours later, the mood in the lab had shifted. What began as a polite meeting with a curious student had turned into a deep technical session. Prica had suggested 3 alternate biocompatible materials. One of them, a silicone polyurethane hybrid used in heart valves, caught everyone's attention. "Can we model that today?" Dr. Torres asked one of the engineers. "I can run a simulation in 2 hours." As the team set to work, a quiet buzz spread around the lab. Scientists started referencing the girl with the notebook. Word reached senior researchers. Screens were cleared, schedules were postponed. And then around 2:45 p.m., everything stopped. Bill Gates entered the building. He walked in quietly without cameras or assistants. Just him, holding a small black folder. When he stepped into the lab, the team stood up. "Prica Froze." Gates smiled at her. "So," he said, nodding at her notebook on the table. "This is what caused all the disruption." Prica stood up, unsure what to say. "You've given us a lot to think about," he said. "I've read your notes 3 times now." "Really?" she asked, stunned. "Really? I even looked up some of your references myself. I hadn't read that German study." "Good catch." The other researchers chuckled. Gates sat across from her and lowered his voice slightly, serious now. "But I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." Prica nodded. "Why did you dig so deep into this project?" "It wasn't homework. It wasn't required." "Why?" Prica hesitated. "Because I wanted to know how it worked," she said. "And if something's going inside someone's brain, I think it should be perfect." Gates studied her for a long moment. "That's the answer I hoped for," he said finally. "Because I'm not just interested in your technical feedback. I'm interested in how your brain works." Prica blinked. "What do you mean?" "You didn't just find a mistake," he said. "You found a pattern no one else saw. That's not just intelligence. That's a way of thinking." He paused, then continued. "Would you be willing to undergo some tests with us? Nothing scary. No needles or wires. Just some advanced brain scans and problem-solving tasks." Prica looked unsure. "I don't want to be a lab rat," she said quietly. Gates smiled. "Neither do I. That's why we're not asking you to be one. But if you agree, you'll be helping us understand how brilliant young minds like yours see problems differently. That could change how we design technology for everyone." He paused. "And of course your parents would be part of every step. No secrets, no pressure." Prica looked at her notebook. She had always thought it was just a personal space to explore ideas. Now it felt like a map to something much bigger. She nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay," Gates echoed. "Then tomorrow we begin." The next morning, Prica arrived at the Gates Neurotech Center with her parents. This time, she was wearing a navy hoodie and jeans instead of her usual school uniform. Her notebook was still tucked under her arm. But today wasn't about showing diagrams. Today they wanted to see her. "Are you sure about this, Beta?" her mom asked softly as they stepped out of the car. Prica nodded. He said no wires, no needles. Inside, Dr. Lena Torres met them at the front desk, smiling warmly. "Good morning, Sharma family. Everything's ready. Mr. Gates will join us shortly." She led them through a different part of the building, one Prica hadn't seen before. It felt more clinical. The lights were dimmer, the walls thicker. Doors opened only after badge scans and keypad codes. At the third security door, Prica hesitated. "Is this still part of the tour?" Dr. Torres turned back and gave her a look that was equal parts reassurance and curiosity. "It's where we do our most sensitive cognitive mapping." Beyond the final door was a sleek lab filled with machines. In the center stood a chair, like a dentist's chair, surrounded by an arch of small robotic arms and glowing sensor pads. "This," Dr. Torres explained, "is our neurograph scanner. It maps how the brain activates when solving different types of problems. It's completely non-invasive." Prica stared at the machine. "It looks like something from a sci-fi movie." "It's not far off," a familiar voice said from behind. Bill Gates stepped into the room, dressed casually this time, holding a tablet in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. "Ready?" he asked gently. Prica swallowed hard, then nodded. "Essays." 20 minutes later, she sat still in the chair, a soft rubber cap placed over her head. Dozens of tiny electrodes gently touched her scalp. A screen was lowered in front of her eyes, and a small handheld button was placed in her palm. "Just press the button when you've solved the problem," Dr. Torres said. The first puzzle appeared, a basic arithmetic question. Too easy. Prica pressed the button instantly. Next came a series of increasingly complex problems: algebra, logic games, pattern recognition, then rotating 3D shapes, then imaginary navigation through invisible mazes. With each task, the machine above her whirred and clicked, recording everything. Behind the glass, Gates and his lead engineers stood watching massive brain scan displays. And what they saw stunned them. Prica's brain wasn't just active, it was synchronized. Regions that usually activated separately were lighting up together in perfect rhythm. The prefrontal cortex, parietal lobe, and even parts of the cerebellum were firing as a unit. She's forming cross-lobe connections in real time, one neurologist whispered. No delays in signal transmission, another added. It's instantaneous. Gates leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowed. What about the frontoparietal loop? The next morning, Prica arrived at the Gates Neurotech Center with her parents. This time, she was wearing a navy hoodie and jeans instead of her usual school uniform. Her notebook was still tucked under her arm. But today wasn't about showing diagrams. Today they wanted to see her. Are you sure about this, Beta? Her mom asked softly as they stepped out of the car. Prica nodded. He said no wires, no needles. Inside, Dr. Lena Torres met them at the front desk, smiling warmly. Good morning, Sharma family. Everything's ready. Mr. Gates will join us shortly. She led them through a different part of the building, one Prica hadn't seen before. It felt more clinical. The lights were dimmer, the walls thicker. Doors opened only after badge scans and keypad codes. At the third security door, Prica hesitated. Is this still part of the tour? Dr. Torres turned back and gave her a look that was equal parts reassurance and curiosity. It's where we do our most sensitive cognitive mapping. Beyond the final door was a sleek lab filled with machines. In the center stood a chair, like a dentist's chair, surrounded by an arch of small robotic arms and glowing sensor pads. This, Dr. Torres explained, is our neurograph scanner. It maps how the brain activates when solving different types of problems. It's completely non-invasive. Prica stared at the machine. It looks like something from a sci-fi movie. It's not far off, a familiar voice said from behind. Bill Gates stepped into the room, dressed casually this time, holding a tablet in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. Ready? He asked gently. Prica swallowed hard, then nodded. Essays. 20 minutes later, she sat still in the chair, a soft rubber cap placed over her head. Dozens of tiny electrodes gently touched her scalp. A screen was lowered in front of her eyes, and a small handheld button was placed in her palm. Just press the button when you've solved the problem, Dr. Torres said. The first puzzle appeared, a basic arithmetic question. Too easy. Prica pressed the button instantly. Next came a series of increasingly complex problems: algebra, logic games, pattern recognition, then rotating 3D shapes, then imaginary navigation through invisible mazes. With each task, the machine above her whirred and clicked, recording everything. Behind the glass, Gates and his lead engineers stood watching massive brain scan displays. And what they saw stunned them. Prica's brain wasn't just active, it was synchronized. Regions that usually activated separately were lighting up together in perfect rhythm. The prefrontal cortex, parietal lobe, and even parts of the cerebellum were firing as a unit. She's forming cross-lobe connections in real time, one neurologist whispered. No delays in signal transmission, another added. It's instantaneous. Gates leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowed. What about the frontoparietal loop? Fully active, Dr. Torres said, and she's showing connectivity. Patterns we've never recorded before, not even in adult savants. They watched as Prica completed one task after another, barely blinking, her fingers tapping the button with precise rhythm. 2 hours later, the session ended. The scanner powered down, and Prica, looking mildly tired but still alert, pulled the cap off her head and rubbed her scalp. Gates entered the room holding a bottle of water and a smile. You just set a record, he said. For what? She asked, sipping the water. For being the youngest person to max out our cognitive complexity thresholds, he replied. You solved every puzzle we had, including ones designed for university-level researchers. Prica didn't know what to say. Her parents stood by the door, their faces a mixture of pride and alarm. But Gates wasn't smiling anymore. His voice lowered as he sat across from her. Prica, there's something I want to share. Something we haven't made public. She leaned forward, curiosity rising. We started the Cognivault project to help people with neurological conditions, he said. That's real. But it's not the whole story. What's the rest? She asked. Gates held up his tablet and tapped a few times. The wall screen behind him flickered to life, showing lines of code, brainwave data, and something that looked like a map of thought itself. We're trying to build a brain-computer interface, he said. One that doesn't just treat injuries, but enhances the brain's natural abilities, allows humans to keep up with artificial intelligence. Prica blinked. You mean, like mental upgrades? Something like that, he replied. But we've hit a wall. Our models rely on assumptions about how brains process information. You just broke every one of them. I didn't mean to, she said quietly. Gates smiled. That's the point. Your brain works differently. It sees connections others miss. Might be the key to building an interface that works with the brain instead of just on top of it. Then he added, We're hoping you'll help us. That evening, back in the hotel room, Prica sat cross-legged on the bed, her notebook open. Her parents were talking in low voices across the room, clearly unsure how to process what they had heard. Bill Gates had offered her a temporary research advisory role just for the spring break week, supervised 4 hours a day, with either parent present at all times. Dr. Torres would be her direct mentor, yet it all felt surreal. She glanced down at her own notes from that morning's tests. She had sketched a thought. What if the problem with the chip isn't just the material, but the way the electrodes are arranged? She circled the idea and drew a second version of the chip. One, with varied spacing based on brain region activity instead of uniform placement. A shiver ran down her spine. She didn't know if she was ready, but she also knew no one else was thinking like this, and that scared her more than anything else. The lab smelled like sterile plastic and cold air. On the second day of her official spring break visit, Prica sat at a high table beside Dr. Lena Torres. Spread in front of her were 3D printed models of the Cognivault chip, microscopic scans of polymer layers, and a holographic projection of the latest neural thread design. And around the room stood 5 full-time scientists, each of them over the age of 30, watching an 11-year-old revise their work. This is where I think the problem starts, Prica said, pointing to a cluster of evenly spaced electrodes on a neural thread replica. You're placing them with perfect symmetry. But the brain isn't symmetrical. Activity density isn't uniform across regions. The engineers exchanged glances. Go on, said Dr. Torres. Prica clicked on her tablet and pulled up an annotated brain scan from yesterday's cognitive mapping. See here? This part of my parietal lobe lit up heavily during logic puzzles, but this section barely activated at all. So why are we treating those two areas as equal in the chip design? Vijay Patel, the head of materials engineering, frowned. Because standardization makes manufacturing scalable. But brains aren't standardized, Prica countered. Would you put the same shoe design on every foot, even if half the people had different toes? There was silence. Then laughter. Not mocking laughter, but surprised, delighted. Well said, Dr. Torres grinned. She pulled up a fresh chip model on the screen. Let's try it, she said. Variable electrode density. Based on regional activity, they began adjusting the design. One by one, the skeptical engineers leaned in. A neurologist entered the room halfway through and stayed, quiet for 20 minutes before finally saying, She's right. This could reduce tissue stress. By the afternoon, they had a new prototype, a Cognivault, variant with region-specific electrode groupings, layered in an updated polymer Prica had suggested the day before. They uploaded it into the simulation system. Everyone gathered around the giant screen as the system began its neural interaction modeling, predicted inflammation down 76%. Signal clarity up 39%. A cheer broke out. Vijay turned to Prica, eyes wide. We've been working on this for 4 years. You just solved a design bottleneck in 2 days. Prica's face flushed red. She wasn't used to praise like this. Bill Gates wasn't there in person. He was in a virtual meeting with government health advisors. But as soon as he heard, he sent a short message to Dr. Torres. Tell her I said this is what brilliance looks like. Later that day, Dr. Torres walked Prica down a quiet hallway lined with screens displaying real-time brain scans. "You're not just smart," she said. "You think sideways. You see relationships we miss. That's not something we can teach." "I just don't know how to stop thinking," Prica admitted. "Even when I try to sleep, I keep seeing patterns in my head." Dr. Torres nodded. "It's a gift and a weight." They stopped at a display showing a split screen. Comparison: the original Cognivalt chip and Prica's redesign. The difference was dramatic. "We'll begin testing this version next month in animal models," Dr. Torres said. "If results hold, we'll apply for human trials." Then she added, "Bill wants to talk to you privately tomorrow. Not about engineering, about something else." Prica blinked. "What else is there?" Dr. Torres just gave a small, mysterious smile. "He thinks you're ready." Says, that evening in the hotel, her parents were buzzing with emotion. Her father, usually calm and reserved, kept pacing. Her mother was researching patents online. "They said you'll be named as a co-developer," her father said, stunned, "on a design used in a neural interface chip." Prica nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She stared at the ceiling above her bed, thinking about what Dr. Torres had said. "He thinks you're ready." Ready for what? Why did Gates want to speak to her alone? Something about that made her stomach twist. She wasn't just helping improve a medical device anymore. Something bigger was happening. The next morning, Bill Gates sat waiting in a quiet glass-walled garden inside the facility. Flowers bloomed in geometric beds. Birds fluttered through programmed wind currents. Prica approached, notebook in hand. "Sit," he said gently. She did. "I want to tell you something," he began. "Something that only 5 people in this building know." He paused. "There's a second version of Cognivalt, one we haven't made public." Prica looked up sharply. "It's called Cognivalt Prime," he said. "And it's not designed to restore lost function. It's designed to expand brain performance, faster processing, memory enhancement, even mental multitasking." Prica was silent. "It's early," Gates continued, "but real. And we're stuck. We can't align the interface without cognitive feedback loops that match the brain's natural rhythms." "You want me to help?" she asked. "I want you to think about whether this is something you'd even want to help with," he replied. "Because this crosses a line. It's not about healing anymore. It's about evolving." He looked at her seriously. "And if we do it wrong, it could hurt people. Or change what it means to be human." Prica's breath caught. "I'm not even 12, she whispered. Gates gave a soft smile. "Exactly. That's why I'm asking, not telling." He leaned back. "You don't have to answer now. But if you say yes, you'll be part of the most important design meeting we've ever held." Prica nodded slowly. Her mind was already turning, thinking in diagrams, thinking in questions. What happens when the human brain stops being enough? And more importantly, should we try to make it more? 2 weeks later, Prica stood once again in the Gates Neurotech Center. But this time, everything was different. She wasn't just a guest anymore. After the breakthrough redesign of the Cognivalt chip in her private conversation with Bill Gates about Cognivalt Prime, the story had quietly spread among a small group of senior researchers and executives. But Gates had kept his promise. There were no press releases, no news articles, no interviews. He had told her, "If the world hears about this, it will be when you're ready." And she wasn't, not yet. Instead, Gates had given her a new kind of offer, one that didn't ask her to give up her childhood. A week before, at the same garden where they had first spoken in private, Gates had met with her parents and said calmly, "We'd like Prica to work with our neurotechnology advisory group 1 day a week. After school. Just 3 hours. Nothing more." Her mother had been suspicious. "You mean you want to hire our daughter?" "No," Gates had replied. "I want to include her voice. Her way of thinking. Not full-time, not even part-time, but just enough to keep the conversation growing." "And school?" her father had asked. "Untouched," Gates said. "This would supplement, not replace. Think of it as science club, with global consequences." He had smiled, and for the first time, her parents had smiled too. Back in the present. Now on her first official Thursday, Prica walked into the private lab space that had been redesigned. Just for her, A quiet corner with a large touch screen. A whiteboard, a comfy chair, and of course her own lab badge clipped to her sweater. It read, Prica Sharma, research contributor. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it. She still went to school every morning, still saw her friends, still did homework like any other 11-year-old. But once a week, she entered a world where scientists listened to her thoughts and engineers asked her questions no one had ever bothered to ask before. And today she was meeting the others. That afternoon, inside a quiet conference room at the far end of the neurotech floor, 5 chairs were arranged around a digital table. Dr. Torres introduced the group. Prica, these are some of the most gifted, young minds we've found working in global science today. All of them are under 18. All of them think differently. Just like you. Prica looked around. A tall boy with dark curly hair gave a small wave. I'm Alex. I've been helping with orbital navigation design at Blue Arrow. A girl with braids and a biology badge said, I'm Maya. I'm designing algae that can digest plastic. Another boy with thick glasses and a math notepad added, I'm Rahul. I specialize in computational geometry. I'm 10. Prica sat down slowly. No one laughed at her. No one stared. No one asked about her IQ. They just started talking. About bioadaptive polymers, about AI integration limits, about how neural signals could be naturally stabilized with rhythmic, magnetic feedback. For the first time in her life, Prica didn't feel like the smartest person in the room. She felt like a part of the room. That evening in the car, her dad asked, So, how was your first day as an advisor? Prica stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker past. I think, she said softly, I found where I belong. He nodded, smiling, and she opened her notebook. Again, already sketching a new idea for Signal. Harmonization in asynchronous brain networks. 2 months later, the redesigned Cognivol chip with Prica's contribution entered final approval stages for human clinical trials. Bill Gates never once mentioned her name publicly, because she had asked him not to. This isn't about being famous, she had told him. It's about fixing something. Quietly, if needed, and so he kept her name off the press releases. But inside the lab, everyone knew. She was the one who saw what they missed, the one who thought differently, the one who made it possible. And somewhere, between math homework and mango juice, between school plays and secret diagrams, Prica Sharma quietly changed the future of human intelligence, not with a microphone, not with a spotlight, but with a notebook and the courage to raise her hand and say, I think there's a problem.